developer side of things, once you can acquire that land or get that land under contract and then market it to a developer, there's a lot of opportunity to make. Now talk about our items of discussion. So I don't have a lot of fancy slides, but we have a lot of points to cover. So let's talk about the first one, which is buy, sell, and referrals. So just like in residential, we obviously have the opportunity to help people buy, commercial real estate. And so commercial, if you think about it, is really anything like, let's say in the multi-family space, it would be 5 or more units in a small apartment building. For instance, that's a sixplex. It might be a small apartment building that's 10 to 12 or 20 units. It might be a medium-sized apartment building that's 50 to 100 units. It might be an entire, apartment multi-unit or multi-building 400-unit type thing, and that would all be commercial real estate. So anything more than 4 units, like a fourplex, triplex, or duplex, are all considered residential still. When you get above 4, it becomes commercial. So that's just in the residential kind of living arrangement. Now, you think about it, it's like commercial real estate. How is that apartments? Well, it's because apartments are bigger than 4 units is why they're classified under commercial real estate. The same thing could be that you're helping someone buy, say a corner building that they're going to do a restaurant, or they're going to do a daycare, or they're going to do whatever they're going to do. They're just buying, the land and a particular commercial building in a zoned commercial area. It's not that scary. It's pretty much the same thing when you understand that the paperwork is very similar but different in some ways. So I will mention a couple little details when we talk about buying. The difference would be that there are some basic forms, but oftentimes in the commercial space, the seller's agent or attorney may write the purchase agreement for the buyer to review and sign, and there might be some back and forth negotiations. And where in residential, there's just like fill in the blanks and check the box, where in commercial, it's going to be back and forth and a lot of, changing of languages and paragraphs and lines. So first tip is make sure you have someone knowledgeable working with you as another commercial person if you're new. Number 2, to minimize liability, you should definitely have the client's commercial real estate attorney to go alongside with you at the end, not the whole thing, because that's going to cost some time and money, but kind of at the end before it's a done deal, to have them review the documents. So that way it takes it off of us as a company, takes it off as you as an agent, and puts it onto them as a knowledgeable business, commercial buyer with their attorney. So it just, minimizes the risk, if you will. The other thing to look at when it comes to buying is the fact that you're going to be doing additional due diligence. We talk about an inspection period in residential where you would typically do, a 3, 5, 7, 10-day inspection. You have an inspector go in there. It costs maybe $350 to, $500. And they inspect the house inside and out. Well, the same kind of thing happens with commercial real estate, but it's like 3 times more. And in addition to just the inspection of the property and in the actual structure, there's going to be some underground work and other more deeper things as far as what's going on under the ground. We're going to be dealing more with probably easement issues, easement access issues, which Boyce can tell you all about. But the cool thing about it is that it's not that different. It's just more involved in some ways. And one of the things that we do when we talk about underground, because you're not just buying the building, you're also buying the potential of underground issues that would be things like, for instance, contaminants and other type things. So what they typically do is what's called a phase 1 test. And that phase one test, that you hire a company, they come out, they drill a few boring samples, they check for contamination if it was an old like gas station or whatever it happens to be, or maybe it was a dry cleaner, or a number of different things. They just want to make sure that if there's bank financing involved, you're going to have to get a phase one environmental test. Beyond that, if they find anything that kind of puts up a little bit of a yellow flag or a red flag, they're then going to do an order of phase two, which might be more extensive. And by the way, when I say all this, someone's going to have to pay for that. Now, oftentimes that's negotiated, whether you split it as the buyer and seller, or the seller pays it, or the buyer pays it. It's all in the negotiations. But I will tell you that these phase one and phase two together in some projects I've seen can be anywhere from 10, 15,000 to 30, 40, $100,000 on bigger sites. So just keep that in mind. Again, working with an experienced agent, you're going to get a lot more guidance and things on that. So beyond that, on the buying side, it's a little bit different on the way that escrow and earnest money is held. The time periods are much longer. So instead of closing in 30 days, it might take 6 months to go through the due diligence period. You might be talking about buying a business and also the real estate. So it's just a longer time period, but the payday can be a whole lot bigger. And I'll just end with the payday, because we're talking about making money, that it's the Wild West. You can negotiate in anything you want. It doesn't have to be a traditional 5, 5.5, or 6%. When I say that, that's the amount that the seller would pay. So in a commercial deal, it could be 10%, where 5% goes to the listing side, 5% goes to the buying side. But on the same note, it could be 4% of a listing fee, and that goes to the listing agent, and there's no money for the buying side. You're like, what? Well, yeah, you have to negotiate that into the deal, or make sure under your buyer's representation agreement that you're going to get paid for doing that deal from your commercial client, which is, again, very unusual, because in in residential, it's always kind of an assumed thing, like 99% of the time or 95% of the time, that the buyer's agent's going to get paid by the listing agent / seller as part of their listing agreement when it goes on to the MLS. Speaking of which, there are a limited amount of deals that you can see on the MLS. Typically, if you look in your area, for some outside of the country, I'm just going to say that it's going to be different, maybe different portals that you're using. But the idea is that in there, they will list commissions if it's an MLS type, residential type portal. If it's on a commercial portal, like LoopNet or .net or CREX, and there's a number of other portals out there. The fact is that they may not list anything. So as part of your LOI or letter of intent, which is kind of the start of putting together a purchase agreement and showing them that you're serious, that's kind of what you'll do as the buying agent. And then the seller will at some point get involved and write the purchase agreement. Sometimes, it just depends. Again, it's so hard because it's different in all deals with commercial. It's not standardized like residential, where we're used to doing it in a certain way. But you got to make sure you cover yourself, because there may not be any compensation. Even though they're marketing a property for sale, you're thinking, oh, great, I'll get paid. Well, only if you write it in properly, or make sure you're covered through your buyer's rep agreement with your buyer. All right, well, that was one little segment right there, the buy right there. So now we'll speed it up a little bit and talk about the sell side. So the buy and sell part of making money, of course, if you're a buyer's agent, you're going to help someone buy. But if you're a listing agent, you're going to help someone sell, right? And so same thing here, similar to what we just talked about, is that as a listing agent, that's where you're going to need to be a little bit more knowledgeable, because they're going to be like entrusting you with selling this piece of commercial real estate. And if you have no experience at all, You can kind of stumble it in a little bit into it with a buyer who's like, yeah, I want to buy something. I heard you're in real estate. Can you help me find a property? That's different than getting an actual listing contract to market this property, which is going to be much different than the way we market a residential property. It's not just throw it on the MLS. The listing agreement is very similar. But again, you're going to negotiate up front, what you're going to get paid. Is any of that money going to go to another buyer's agent, or is that just what you're paid and they have to negotiate their own? Typically, instead of that being, a 3 to 6 month listing agreement, you're typically going to be doing a year or two. Again, because all these things take longer. On the listing side as well, there's different things where we'll talk about where you could list different properties, like land, for instance, might take a lot longer than selling a business with real estate. So again, just kind of think about those time frames a little bit. All right, now let's go on to the idea of referrals. And that's probably where we should have started, which is, if you want to make money in commercial real estate, one of the best ways to do it is just to get referrals. Let people know that you're not only a residential, but a commercial real estate agent. On your card, as I've done, and I've encouraged all of my new agents, including my daughter, is to put residential and commercial. Now, you may not be, it doesn't say you're an expert in commercial, but it just says that you do residential and commercial, because most people only do one or the other. And that's okay, because there's people who make plenty of money just doing one or the other. But to me, I like being able to have multiple streams and possibilities. So I would say you should definitely know both. There's a lot of commercial people, however, who've made a lot of money, who are just not going to deal with the MLS and deal with the same type of continuing ed that we have to do on the residential side. So they just choose to be commercial, which is kind of the evolution. People who go from residential to commercial, or start with commercial, do really well in commercial, are not going to even touch residential. And therefore, the same people, listen close, that you're going to get a referral, that you're going to give a referral to do your deal or work with you on commercial real estate, are the same people who you'll need to ask them, of course, because you always have to ask or you don't get, to receive referrals on any people they know that are buying and selling in the residential space, because they typically aren't going to do anything with that, and they don't want to deal anything with that. So therefore, they're going to give that referral to you, and you're going to negotiate your referral fee. So let's talk about that. So the typical thing is that, you have a person who says, hey, I want to sell or I want to buy. You're not knowledgeable, but you want to be involved and learn and make some money, right? So it's typically going to be a 75-25 split. Now, I only say that because that's pretty typical across the board, but everything's negotiable. Remember, in real estate, put it in writing. So number one, you would say, okay, what's that mean? Well, 75 would go to them to do all the work. And because you made the referral, you could do literally nothing other than, here's the name of Johnny or Jane, go call them. I'll be on the call, or I'll make the introduction, or I'll be at the first meeting or whatever. And then you could just kind of fade away. A lot of people, they just refer them and they never do anything more. It's just name, number, call them, boom. But before you give them name, number, call them, boom, you need to say, hey, I got someone who's listened. I'm real new. Set up the referral fee paperwork. EXP has that in place. You can download that and send it to them. Typically, it'll be signed by the agents and the brokers of record for that particular company or brokerage. And then now we can start sharing some information. Sometimes you'll be doing, confidentiality stuff, because this is dealing with stuff that's a little bit more touchy, especially when it's a business and the real estate, where we're looking at, their financials, their profit and loss statements, their balance sheets, etc., that come along with, everything from if they've had any kind of, when they bought it, did they have any phase 1 or phase 2 underground environmental stuff done? You would want to know that as part of your due diligence period. So with that said, I just threw in there a little bit of the confidentiality agreement that's typically signed along with an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. So those are two kind of things that go hand in hand, typically the same, but sometimes could be separate documents to make sure you're totally covered. All right, so then on the referral side, let's say you're going to be more actively involved. Well, you could then, say, hey, 60-40, where I'm going to take 40 and be involved, and you're going to take 60 and take the lead, or whatever in between. I mean, there's some times when I've seen deals where it's, 90-10. I'll give you 10%. I'm going to do 90% of the work, and 10% of, a $30 million deal is still a lot of money. So you'd be crazy not to take that, right? Especially if you can just sit back and do nothing, and let the experts do all the work. All right, well, that's enough on referrals. I hope you're taking notes. If you have questions, definitely we'll open that up here in just a little bit. Next thing I want to talk about is tenant representation and leasing. Because if you're a tenant representative, that is how, when I first started in commercial real estate, was able to make some really good money. So I want to kind of share some stories on why that's a really good thing. So if you know businesses that are leasing space, if you know businesses that are expanding into more locations, in my particular world, believe it or not, happens to be tobacco and restaurant. I've done some stuff with landscapers. I've done some stuff with other small business owners. But the cool part about tenant representation is you're reaching out to those people, whether you see, they know they're looking for a space. Oftentimes my clients they go out and find the space. They see the sign, they take a picture of the address, the building, and of course the sign on the wall or in the window, and they shoot that to me, and then I go to work. And really, that's a matter of making contact with the listing agent. There is some lingo and things that you will have to learn. So it is sometimes a little bit cumbersome in how you show that you're an amateur. So you definitely want to talk the right language when you're talking to commercial leasing agents, because it's not the same residential lingo. But when you do, and you can and I can help you through that for those people that want to work together on a referral too, here, especially in Minnesota. But once you've done that, the next thing you're doing is you're going to basically get a marketing packet. You're going to you're going to, do a showing or view the property. You're going to, at some point, write up a letter of intent, an LOI. In doing so, you're going to show that your client is serious, and here's the terms that they'd be interested in, even though they may have published rates of price per square foot. You can still negotiate anything. Remember, it's real estate. What you probably won't be able to negotiate, though, is the CAM charges, the common area maintenance, which would also include things like property taxes, insurance, and things like maintaining all of the utilities and everything from the HVAC, electrical, plumbing. I mean, that's all on you. So when you're helping a client rent a space, unlike renting an apartment, if it's a triple net lease, is what they call it, it means that it's totally on your client to inherit that HVAC system, to inherit. So funny. That they inherit any of the problems with the plumbing or issues. That's all on them. If there's like they want to upgrade, or they have to do an ADA type bathroom, or there's something happens with the toilet, it has to be replaced, or it's broken, whatever, grab bars need to be in place, whatever, doors need to be widened. That might be all part of the tenant improvements, TI we call it. But the fact of the matter is that that's all negotiable. So oftentimes, even though they're responsible after the fact, up front, to get the space up to speed, especially if it's not up to code in certain things, like for instance, bathrooms, the ADA bathrooms, then what's going to happen is the tenant, if they know better, working with an experienced tenant representative agent like myself, would ask for so much per square foot. It could be 10, it could be 20, it could be up to $40 per square foot. So like, let's just say on 1,000 square foot space at $20 a square foot, that's $20,000 that would go towards tenant improvements. So they're going to use that to upgrade the lighting. They're going to use that to put in the new flooring, to upgrade the bathroom, which, by the way, that 20 grand doesn't go very far for commercial rehab. But nonetheless, it's kind of a way to offset their overall expenses, because they might get 20 grand from the landlord, but they're going to put another $80,000 into actually opening the store, or opening, getting that space ready. If it's a restaurant and it hasn't been a restaurant before, in other venting and hoods and plumbing and fixtures and trade fixtures need to go in there, it could be, $250,000. So tenant representation, great way to make money. Again, you still have to negotiate how much you're going to make from and typically now different than like a buy or sell. That typically is built into the listing agent. They have money available to pay a tenant representation. You need to ask for it. Typically, it's going to be a percentage of the overall lease, similar to what you would think of like buying or selling residential. Sometimes it's going to be per square foot. So give an example. It might be $2 per square foot. So 2,500 square foot place at $2 a square foot is $5,000. So that would be your fee in putting the deal together. Now, I'll give you a quick example here of how much money can be made in tenant representation. So perfectly, this is like the best case scenario. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there was one of my tenants, tobacco client, who had a space up in White Bear Lake, for some of you that know the Twin Cities area, which, by the way, is only 20 minutes from my house, and probably maybe even 15. But I never went up there. I never toured the space. I negotiated the lease all on the phone. We did some back and forth by email. There was an attorney involved that reviewed it. It got signed, done, and done. When it was signed and done, that was the first time we got into the space, only because they just knew they wanted it. They could see most of it in the windows. It's commercial real estate. It's like, well, whatever, because the outside envelope, from the roof to the windows to the doors, the landlord takes care of that. The inside, they knew they were going to have to build out some things. And yes, there was a bathroom, and yes, it was ADA compliance. So there wasn't a lot of mystery. But it's interesting. I say this because I didn't see the space until after the deal was done. It took me maybe 6 to 8 hours of phone calls, emails, back and forth, over a period of about 2-3 weeks, but just about 8 hours of time invested. And I made $8,500 on that deal. So do the math per hour. It's a whole lot more than a high paid attorney gets paid. So think about that. I'm not saying that it's going to be that easy and you're going to make that much money on every tenant representation deal, but there's some really good money to be made there. Now, the leasing agent, just like kind of being the listing agent, much more knowledge needs to be there. So typically, when a property is listed, there's a property management company that manages it on the day-to-day, week-by-week, month-to-month basis, yearly. But the leasing people come in just to get the spaces leased, which may be in connection with the property management company, but oftentimes it might be separate. And so they would just, again, have to have a whole lot more knowledge to be able to market it. But again, not a lot of work. Good money to be made, no question about it. So there you go. I'm going to leave it at that. All right. Now let's talk about land deals, developers, business brokerage, and then overseas deals, and kind of wrap this up here so we don't go too long. On land deals, that is also going to be considered commercial, vacant land where someone's going to buy that corner, develop it. So oftentimes you'll be what we call bird dogging and finding some properties for a tenant who says, hey, I want to build, whether it's, who knows, could be a restaurant, it could be a bike shop, it could be a gas station, and they're going to find a specific thing. Now, it comes into where this knowledge base that is now learning about things like zoning, and you're going to be learning about the process of getting approval from the city. There's going to be conditional use permits, there's going to be variances, there's going to be a lot of things that some of those things I've just mentioned do come into new construction, and someone adding on to their garage or knowing that they can do a 3-car garage in residential. But for commercial, it's super heavy duty when it comes to making sure you got all your ducks in a row before when what we're going to be able to do with this land. Does it tie into the city water and sewer? We call that sack and whack, which I won't get into is either. Is it in that particular designated area? Is it going to be well and septic? Just like we would do with residential, there's still stuff with commercial. And once you can find that land that is identified that works for your client, same kind of thing. You are on the buying side doing a land deal, working with a landowner who might have it listed, may not. A lot of times they don't. So then you become kind of wearing both hats, which means that you can then negotiate in the deal. Like, I have a buyer. Are you willing to pay me to do this? No, yes, whatever. It's all in the negotiations, because at some point, either they're going to make less on the deal or the buyer is going to pay a little bit more because they got to build in that commission for you. I hope that makes sense. And look, business people understand it. It's business. So it's not like you have to be like all hiding behind the fact that, you're going to ask for a commission. The developer side of things, once you can acquire that land or get that land under contract and then market it to a developer, there's a lot of opportunity to make. So as some of you may know, I'm working on a big deal in Plymouth. We call it the Pride of Plymouth project. It's going to be about a $32 to $33 million buyout to buy 4 out of these 5 parcels on the corner of Highway 55 and 494. And so we're working as a team. Again, this goes back to why it's awesome to have a team in place. So we have a number of people, one gentleman from overseas in India who actually came on to the Legends International team, Steve, and he had some contacts with some people that were in the hospitality, hotel, motel business. We made contact with them. They've tried to put this together 3, 4 other times, maybe 5 other times, and they were never able to get it successfully off the ground. So we're now in the kind of final stages of putting this deal together. So between Asif, Brian, some of you know Brian Gully, also, of course, probably know Chris, for some of you that have been on these calls, who's part of our leadership council as well. And so Chris Business is part of that. And then myself as kind of the local guy with, a lot of the local knowledge of putting deals together and negotiating stuff with the city and working a lot with these landowners. So that's a $33 million deal. Won't get into the specifics, but there's a good chunk of money to be made and then split up between 4 people on the team. Again, really nice payday. And then that doesn't even account for if we work with the developers who are then going to be leasing the spaces out, that we could then get in on the leasing side and make money again when we're filling the space, whether with a hotel or with Subway or Dunkin' Donuts or whoever's coming into the commercial part of the space. It could be leasing the apartments, each of the apartments that will get leased. That could be another income stream. Some of them might be condos, so we could be listing those for sale. So pretty cool how you can take one land deal and parlay it in that to multiple transactions. So there you go. Now, if you know how that might work, or like I know my daughter has identified a really cool area in Tallahassee in the railroad district, we'll call it, that she could work with the landowner, then find some developers that could develop it, make it some really cool retail space or some restaurant space, put in some parking, do whatever. I mean, it might be, a $3-4 million deal to put it all together. And just by having the vision of going, hey, that space should be reimagined, whoever can put it together and can properly document their involvement can get paid a commission. It's real estate, right? So again, quick story and kind of exciting on what she's doing. All right, the next thing is business brokerage. And by the way, on the land side, as you probably have figured, the land deals, whether you're buying or selling, you could be on either side of that. Like you could find someone who's a farmer who wants to sell some farmland, or you could find someone who owns, a lot of lakeshore and help that get developed to be a resort or whatever. So you could be on both sides of that. I just kind of jumped in and showed you an example of the buying side. Um, but it could be helping someone sell their land and then finding a developer. The business brokerage, think of it this way. First of all, we didn't do this initially when I got involved in EXP 2 years ago, which is so crazy. It's only been 2 years. This June. Actually, you know what? I'm past my 2-year anniversary. I think my anniversary was on June 4th, technically, but I don't actually, my actual date. Oops, no, it says someone can see my screen. Okay, I don't know what that is. All right, thanks, Colleen, for coming back. When you came back, then it said something about your participant can now view your screen. I'm like, well, that's good. Okay, so then when I was doing all of those deals, one of the things that I learned is that I was doing some business brokerage stuff. But the fact of the matter is that we weren't doing it at the time. And so just about 8 months ago, 6 months ago, I don't know, Colleen, maybe you can help me, that we finally added the business brokerage component to our commercial real estate division. And so we've had some people on the calls. We've talked about different ways we can do it, similar to, like we said, if you don't have a lot of knowledge, but you know someone who wants to buy or sell a restaurant or whatever, with or without real estate. Now, the business brokerage side in its purest form has nothing to do with the real estate, although oftentimes it does involve real estate, because they might be leasing a space where the new buyer is going to assume the lease, or they might be selling the space and the new, and whoever they're selling it to will have to honor that lease of the current tenants in place. But sometimes it's just like they're buying a nail shop, a nail salon, but there's always going to be something to do with the lease, even if there is an actual real estate involved, and that is a $40,000 transaction, and you're going to get 10 or 15% of that, which is much greater than you would on a non-real estate type of deal, because there's a lot of work to be done just to sell what I would call blue sky for the name, the book of business, the clientele, if you will. And then all the things that come with the inventory and the trade fixtures of the business. There's some value there, but it's not like the amount of value that you would find in the real estate side. All right, so with that, I also want to mention overseas deals. So overseas deals, the best example, and you've probably been hearing Jason, who's put this deal together, and I keep forgetting if it's 24 million euros or whatever it is on this hotel deal that he's working with Carlos, but either way, really good money that can be made. Again, here's the best part about it. If it's properly documented and you're in the real estate business, even though you're not licensed in that particular country or in that province or in that state or area, you can still, through EXP, put a deal together, find someone who is locally represented, who is locally knowledgeable, work out the deal, help them with the marketing, help put the deal together on the buying or the selling side. And wow, is there some serious money to be made? Like, I won't go into the details, probably Jason might share at some point, but a whole lot of money if you can put that together. And I think once one or two of these deals get put together, Jason will be kind enough to, it is a lot, will be kind enough to kind of share. Now, it's not necessarily duplicatable, but it is possible. So I think, like anything, if you're able to and willing to do all the things that he's done and know that it might be a 2-year play or a 1-year deal, but to be able to make what would be, 1 or 2 years worth of quote unquote wages or salary of a typical person, to put one deal together is a pretty cool deal. So the cool part about it is, don't limit yourself to just your area or just your country. There's a lot of opportunity with EXP to connect with and work with people all around the world, soon to be 50 countries, 500,000 of us. I keep saying a million. At some point I said we had a million agents. And I think there was anyways, 500,000 agents in the next 5 years. And It could be 10 years, but anyway, it's going to be huge. So the more of us running around the world doing real estate, connecting and working together, collaboratively, means more money and opportunities for all of us, both in commercial and in residential as well. All right, well, there you go. So that's my just off the top of my head breakdown. Now, as you can see, I could take any one of these things and spend an entire hour with a lot more details and slides. But that I'm going to leave up to the experts to train you on, and then work with you on any specific things as we move forward as other segments that we can do in the Wealth Building Wednesday. All right. Take care. Bye for now.